What's going on, my babies? Welcome back to another episode of Can of Heaven. As always, I apologize for any noises in the background in advance and anything of that nature. And before I start these, I like to start these off with a disclaimer by stating that these are for entertainment purposes only and to always do your own research, to come to your own conclusions, to make your own decisions, to have your own answers, and I believe in your ability to be your own person. And I also like to start these off by saying that I apologize for any noises in the background in advance and anything of that nature. So in today's episode, I want to talk about some things that helped me personally regulate my mental well-being or balance my mental well-being, and things that might be able to help you and give you tips and pointers as to what I did and things that you could possibly do to help you. So this is going to be 10 tips that help with depression and anxiety and anything of that nature, or just being organized and stuff like that. So my first tip is to meditate. And I'm sure this is something that most people hear on a consistent basis, but the reason that meditation works is because your mind is constantly working. It's constantly on until the day or until the minute of the day that you go to sleep. And even while you're sleeping, your subconscious is still going. And when you meditate, it gets you into a place of rest, your mental rest. And I want to talk about how to meditate, just because some people think that, well, you're trying to force yourself to not think, or you're trying to force yourself into this place of nothingness. But meditation could be as simple as you sitting and staring at something and just staring at something really intensely, really focused. Or meditating could be you dancing to some, I don't know, some of your favorite music, and you're so in the moment that nothing is bothering you, you're just moving to this music. Another form of meditation could be you drawing and losing track of time. Another example of meditation could be you coloring, or you doing something that involves you using movement but not needing to think about what you're doing. For example, when you're driving in a car and you just get to your destination, that's somewhat a form of meditation. It's not actual meditation, but it does have its own consistency that kind of matches meditations. And so, my first tip is to meditate. And if you want tips and pointers on how to meditate or what will work for you, I would do a lot of research and a lot of internal focusing on, okay, what works for me? What can I actually do? I have work, I have school, I have all these things, and I don't have time throughout my day to just sit down for a couple hours or whatever the case is, right? And if you do have time, I would really recommend just sitting down and just trying to focus on your body and all the sensations that are going on in your body, not externally. But this in its own is a form of thinking, but it's a form of thinking that will get you more in tune with yourself. So it's not something that you really, really have to work for. Versus if you're in math class and you're trying to meditate in math class, you know what I mean? Like, meditation is just you trying to not focus or not think for the sake of thinking. It's you kind of getting into the observer mode. And another way that you can meditate is to recognize where your awareness is. Your awareness usually sits behind your eyes. And you will feel this sensation when this is happening. You will feel what I'm about to talk about. So your awareness is usually behind your eyes, and if you can push that back and push it up, you move into the observer state. And meditation just helps you get control over how to do that. So I would practice meditating, but trying to get into your higher mind. And the simple way of doing that is just to push the awareness that's behind your eyes back to the very back of your brain, and then to pull it up out of your body. And once you are sitting in that awareness, try to keep that for as long as you can, and that will help you relax. My next tip, the second tip, if you're somebody who struggles with organization or keeping yourself in an organized place, I'd recommend writing. And writing could be in multiple different ways. You could do it on your notes, or you could do it in a physical book. My personal recommendation would to be writing in a physical book, because then you have the ability to look at it. And I'm not saying that if you have it on your phone, you're not able to look at it, but it's more in front of you. It's more organized if it's out in your physical reality, because it's something that you will actually notice. Versus if it's on your phone, there's a lot of different things on your phone. Like, for example, if you download 20 apps, you're not really aware of those 20 apps, although there's 20 things going on in your phone. So that's why I'd recommend writing it in a physical book, just because then you get it out and you can physically see it, and every time that you see this book, it reminds you that you need to be doing this. My third tip is to have different organizations for different specific things that will help you de-stress your life. Like, for example, if you're somebody who's really stressed about how fit you are, then have a multitude of different ways to help you stay organized. For example, if you know that the next day you're going to sleep, the next day you plan to go for a run or you plan to go for a walk, then plan your night for that next day. For example, put your shoes out, put the running shoes or the walking shoes right next to your bed, so that when you wake up, you see them, and you being able to see it in your reality will enable you to be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to do this. Or if you're like, okay, I'm going to shower and then I'm going to go run, or I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to go to the gym, then get your outfit ready for that and write it down in some sort of journal, or write it down in some sort of physical, somewhere where you can physically write it down. If you have like a clipboard where you write down your day to day, like your planner, or if you have a schedule that's a whiteboard, write it on your whiteboard. Whatever way you use to organize yourself, write it down. If you don't use anything to organize yourself on your day to day, then I recommend making that part of the second point of writing things down. It'll help you stay organized, and it'll help you stop feeling overwhelmed with all the things you have to do in that day. Even if you don't feel overwhelmed, your subconscious might be stressing because it feels overwhelmed, and you don't know that it's actually that. My next tip, my fourth tip, is to kind of keep your spaces clean. And the reason that I say to keep your spaces clean is that when there's clutter around you, your mind has a tendency to focus on the clutter. And without you realizing it, your external environment will have an impact on your subconscious mind whenever the case presents itself. And when you have a clean space, you feel better. Like, it feels relieving to have a space where you can just sit down and be like, I don't have to clean right now. I don't have to do anything right now. I can just sit here and relax. And the most, you know, I guess relaxing space is the one where you have pretty much everything organized and everything in check. And organization goes and it plays a huge role in this. So my fourth tip is to clean your space and to have a clean space. Even if it's not clean 100% of the time, make it a priority to clean your space. My fifth tip, for if you're struggling mentally and you're struggling with the, I guess, like anxiety or depression, to be very specific, my tip for you, along with all of these other tips, is to focus on what's here and now. And I don't mean here and now as in like what's going on in time and space. I mean like physically here right now. What are you worried about? You're watching this video, that's all that's happening. Unless something else is physically happening. But if you're just sitting here watching this video, or if you're listening to the podcast, be here. Be here with me. And don't stress about anything else that's going on. And I know that seems like something that you shouldn't be doing, but that's only because reality and, society, or American culture, if you're an American, or, most cultures and most schools and most parents, they teach us that we need to be worried about something. right? We need to be focused on the priorities, but they prioritize things in a way that makes us worry rather than to just actually sit down and be organized and be like, oh, okay, I have to do this. Instead of panicking and being like, oh my gosh, I have all this stuff to do and I haven't done it. So, my fifth tip is to be here and now. And just like meditation does, focus on here and now. And if, you have a hard time doing those things, that's where my previous 4 tips come into play. Because the more that you do those 4 previous tips, the more you're able to be in the moment. And the less you worry about stuff, the less you stress about stuff, the less you kind of care about the stuff that's not presented to you right here and now. And obviously it's a good thing to have priorities and to think about all the things that you need to be doing. It's not helpful to you in the moment, especially if it's causing you a lot of stress or anxiety or depression. My 6th tip is if you feel depressed or anxious, find an outlet. And I'm not talking about getting up and going to the gym or doing, some sort of activity that will get you out of feeling that way, because those things are very temporary. Like everything is very, very temporary. And some days, if you feel really, really bad, you're not going to want to get up to go to the gym. And if you're feeling really bad, some days you won't even want to get out of bed. So do things that you know are beneficial for you, especially if you struggle with depression. Depression is very huge in this mixing pot of all the things that I'm talking about that, you need help with. So, obviously, I'm not a therapist, but therapy is also going to help. So that's my 7th tip. My 6th tip, just to make this clear, is to do things that will release the feelings that you're having. Like if you feel really sad, maybe you feel like painting, maybe you feel like writing, maybe you feel like singing. Do something that will help you release that feeling without having to put in so much work and so much effort. Like if you're not good at drawing, just put down a pen and scribble until your little heart is content. And if you're angry, rip a piece of paper until you can't rip that paper anymore. Do things that will physically release that. And then with those broken pieces of paper, glue them back together on another page in a different form. And that's transmutation. And so, if you're struggling with any emotions, release it. Find an outlet that will help you release it and make it into something beautiful. Like, if you feel sad, maybe you draw a bunch of sad faces on a page and then figure out a way to make it into an artwork or a masterpiece, Or if you're sad, write a song and then make it really upbeat and happy. Or if you love to dance, make a dance that will release how you feel, because dance is an art form and it's very beautiful. Or if you're into martial arts and that's your form of art, then make a routine that will, be in line with how you feel. Or if you're a boxer, make a routine that will be in line with how you feel. And, find whatever works for you, because I'm not, I can only give you so many examples before, I get to a point where I can't give you any more examples because I don't know who you are as a person. So that's my 6th tip. Then the 7th is to go see a therapist if you have the ability to see a therapist. If you don't have the ability to see a therapist, do these things and do them consistently. Do them as much as you can every single day. Every single day. And it's going to take a lot of hard work. But so is going to see a therapist and admitting that you need help. So, and it's not something bad to need a therapist. I personally really like therapy because it gives me another point of view to the way that I'm thinking. And it gives me another point of view to say, okay, am I wrong? Am I wrong for doing this thing? Am I wrong for doing this? Is this my fault? Is this my problem? What can I be doing better? And the more you're able to own up to those pieces, the more strong you grow as an individual. And the less these things hurt you. It's not that these things become easier, but the less the things hurt you. And that's the whole point of like going to therapy. You want to feel better. You don't want to feel sad all the time, or you don't want to feel anxious all the time, or you want to be more organized, or you want to be a better version of yourself. So you go and you use this as a tool to help you. All of these things are just tools. And at the end of the day, it's all about how much effort you're going to put into making these tools work for you. And that's a really, really harsh and brutal thing to say. But nobody's going to sit there and make money for you. No one is ever going to sit there and put clothes on you. You know what I mean? Like, when you get hurt, it's on nobody else's body but yours to heal. And your mind is one of those things that you have to keep checking on. It's a part of your body, it's a muscle in your body, and sometimes that muscle gets strained and it gets stressed. And when we just let it be strained and be stressed, it's kind of like if I had a dislocated knee and I was walking around every single day, of course I'd walk kind of funny, because I'm powering through all of this bullshit that my knee is going through. And just saying, well, it's fine because everybody's knees are kind of weird and everybody walks weird. And who am I to say that I need help? So, go see a therapist if it's something that you have the ability of doing. And if you don't have the ability to do that, find ways to make things work for you. Find ways to meditate. Find ways to make yourself feel less stressed. And most of the causes of our like dark days, like when you're depressed or when you're anxious or when you're having these negative emotions, it's usually caused from stress. So the more you can de-stress, or the more you can like release stress, the easier you'll have, like the easier of the work you're going to be doing will become. Like you're not going to be stressed about getting up to go to the gym if you're really, really relaxed. Like if you're on vacation like 100% of the time, which obviously I don't know if anybody really has, is on vacation 100% of the time, but if I was on vacation 100% of the time, and then I came back to this reality of like, oh, okay, I have to go back to work and this and that, I probably wouldn't be stressed because I'd have all the time that I did have to just kind of like be like, oh, okay, you know what? I was kind of bored. After a while, you do get kind of bored. So, de-stressing is really, really beneficial if you can't see a therapist. Do anything in your power to de-stress. And de-stress in healthy ways, because if you're not de-stressing or taking out that stress in a healthy way, it will stress you out, regardless of whether or not you think that it's not. And my 8th tip for today's episode, I'm sorry if you can hear the jacket's really loud. So, my 8th tip is to really, really, really care about yourself. And that could be really cheesy if you're one of those people who's like, that's weird and cheesy and, corny. I don't want to care about myself. Care about yourself. Because the whole reason that you feel like that is because you don't care about yourself. And your subconscious is picking up on that. Most people who have depression or anxiety, they really don't like themselves. Or if you ask them, they're like, I don't really like this about myself. I'm very insecure about this. I'm very nitpicky about this about myself. It might not be like an overall, I don't like myself, but it will be a multitude of different things like, oh, I don't like the way that I do this. I don't like that sometimes I procrastinate. I don't like that sometimes, I don't feel the brightest in the room. Sometimes I don't feel the prettiest in the room. Sometimes I feel insecure about my feet. Sometimes I feel insecure about my knees. Sometimes I feel insecure about my body weight. Sometimes I feel insecure about whatever the case is, right? Love yourself. Love those parts of you that you don't necessarily right now love. And find ways to express that love to that said part of your body. And the reason I say this is because sometimes we neglect ourselves. We don't like the way that we think, or we don't like the way that our brain is structured. If you're clinically diagnosed with depression, maybe you have a hard time accepting that part of yourself, and you're like, life would be so much easier if I just wasn't depressed. Life would be so much easier. Life would be so much easier. Life would be so much easier if all these things weren't happening. If all this bad stuff wasn't here. If I was not here. You know what I mean? So, care about yourself. Because regardless of whether or not you think that to be true or you think that is truth, it's not. And I say it's not truth because just like how I use the analogy of someone vacationing all the time. Maybe that does exist, maybe that is a truth, but it's not my truth. I've never experienced somebody who vacations 100% of the time and who's never, ever, ever, ever stressed. But these are things that will regulate it. It's kind of like, think of your brain as this bucket of water. And every single time that you add stress to it, you scoop in a cup of water. And we collect stress like sponges, especially if we're not taking care of ourselves. Just like how we sponge up information when we're kids, or we sponge up fatty foods forever. Or if we're sponging up good things, just like if you go to the gym every single day, you're sponging up your muscles, right? So you're throwing water into this bucket every single day. This is a way of pouring out the bucket when it gets too full, and then having the ability to start fresh. And when you have the ability to start fresh, you don't overfill the bucket like most people are doing consistently. So these are tips, and this is not like the cure-all, because there's no cure to the way that you feel. You're never gonna be cured to not feel sad again. You're never not gonna be cured to not feel happy again, because that's not real. That's just not how life works. And that itself seems very, very harsh, especially if you're in a state where you feel sad. Because you're like, oh, well, more sad information. Whoop-de-doo, that's why I'm sad, because why can't this existence just be easy? Why can't this just be happy? But there's a piece of you that enjoys the sadness. And it's why it's sad. There's a beauty in the darkness. And if you don't admit that to yourself, your subconscious knows it. So, do what you can with the resources and tools that you have. But take these and actually use them. Try them out for yourself. And if they don't work, they don't work. You know what I mean? But you don't lose anything from trying. And my 8th tip, I think that was my 7th. I'm gonna say this is my 8th tip. So my 8th tip, besides caring about yourself, care about what you're doing to your mentality. Care about who you hang out with. Care about what information you're taking in. That means don't watch the news if you're somebody who gets stressed from watching the news, because you're like, oh my gosh, all this war and disease and famine and all this suffering is happening and I can't do anything about it. It feels out of my control and it feels like doomsday. That's stressing you out. Don't watch the news. If hanging out with your parents stresses you out, don't hang out with your parents. If hanging out with your siblings stresses you out, don't hang out with your siblings. If hanging out with certain friends in your friend group stresses you out, don't hang out with those people anymore. And if being the bad guy stresses you out and, you're scared of being like, well, my parents asked me to go get lunch with them and I don't want to be a bad kid and say no, be a bad kid and say no. Because if they're stressing you out, why are you hanging out with them? To be a good daughter, to be a good sister, to be a good sibling, to be a good brother, to be a good person, because that is very minuscule compared to where you want to be in life. Like, yeah, everybody wants to be a good person, and some people really don't give a fuck to be a good person. But if you're really stressing yourself out over being a good person, let that go. Because everybody is bad, and everybody is good. You just have some parts of you that are bad, some parts of you that are not. So, take care of yourself. And this kind of, I separate this from loving yourself, because loving yourself could be taking yourself out to the spa, or taking yourself out to go get a makeover, or going to the gym, or sitting in a hot tub for hours or taking a bath versus you taking care of yourself and not hanging out with people who stress you out for the simple fact that they stress you out. And if they stress you out, you don't need to give anybody any explanation for why they stress you out. You can just say, well, I don't feel like going out with you guys today, and today is my self-care day, and I already had plans. I had plans to take care of myself, and you're interrupting those plans. My ninth and final, oh wait, no, not my final. My ninth tip: recognize that you can't always be the hero in anybody else's story, just like you can't always be the villain in everybody else's story. Focus on your story. You are alive. You are living your life. You are living a life. You are alive. So don't worry, don't stress about anybody else's life but your own. And I know that sounds really, really selfish, but until you can care about yourself, until you can put yourself on steady ground, you're no good to anybody else. For example, I remember being at this Buddhist retreat center and I was sitting in one of the classes, one of the teachings, and this girl, you could tell that she was going through it. You could tell because she was like, well, global warming is so bad, we're all gonna die, and, like, if we don't take care of this, we're all gonna die. And then she was talking about all the war in the world, and she was just talking about all these dark, negative things. And you could just tell that she was going through it, and it wasn't anything to do with these actual causes. And what came to mind for me was take care of yourself. Because once you take care of yourself, you'll show up for the world. And you'll show up because you can. Because you have the power to show up. And if you don't have the power to show up, you're not going to show up. And you're going to be overwhelmed. And you're going to be stressed. You're not going to be able to handle all of the things that is happening externally. Because you can't even handle the things that are going on internally. You can't help anybody else until you help yourself. So listen to me when I say, don't worry about anybody else's life until you can handle your own. And although to some people that might seem selfish and they're like, well, what if I want to be a humanitarian? What if I want to go out and help people? How are you going to be able to do that if you can't even get out of bed? And maybe your stress, your depression, your anxiety is not that bad, right? Maybe you can get out of bed. But do you love every second of the day? Do you romanticize every second of the day? Do you appreciate? Are you grateful for all the chaos that's happening around you? Because it's not chaos. Or do you struggle with it? And you can't help anybody until you help yourself. Moral of the story. If you're not on steady grounding, how do you expect to help somebody get up? You can't. It's just not a thing. So, my last and final tip to wrap this up. Do these. Actually go out of your way to make things work for you. Do all of these tips as often as you can, as much as you can handle. And I know that some days are harder than others, but that's okay. Because it means that the days that are really, really hard for you are the warrior days. The days where you get your biggest epiphanies. The days where you get the most strength out of it. The days where you realize, if I can handle this day, I'm probably going to handle the rest of this week. I'm probably going to handle the rest of this year, or this month, or the next 10 years. So just continue to do these, and if you're trying, you're succeeding. So pat yourself on the back. And when I say love yourself, on one of the tips that I gave you, it means acknowledge your wins. If you made it through this week without having any, thoughts of being like, ugh, I don't want to do this, or ugh, this is so hard, or whatever the case is that you struggle with, pat yourself on the back. If you went through a whole week where you didn't have a mental breakdown, fucking go out to eat. You know what I mean? Like, celebrate your wins, care about yourself, acknowledge that you're trying, because if you're trying, you're succeeding. So just go out and actually, practice these. And just know that if nobody else has told you, I'm proud of you. But more importantly, make yourself proud of you. Because ain't nobody here. You shouldn't care about anybody else's validation except for your own. So go out and make yourself proud. And with that being said, thanks for tuning in and tapping in. And as always, it's been the spiritual word. So I'll see you in the next one. Peace.